Bleav in LA Football Podcast.
Touchdown Rams!
Touchdown UCLA!
Recovered by the Chargers.
The Trojans back in front.
With your hosts, the Coach and the Don, part of the Bleav Podcast Network, LA's #1 sports podcast network.
What's up, delegates, and welcome back to the Bleav in LA Football Podcast with your hosts, the Coach and the Don. We are part of the Bleav Podcast Network, LA's #1 sports podcast network, the only place with a show for every team in LA and more. We believe in our LA teams. Do you believe? The show is also brought to you by SportsAlDente.com, your recipe for LA sports. Make sure to go ahead over there, use the promo code The Coach and the Don. We are getting close to wrapping up our draft coverage for 2019, but the coach over there, senior draft analyst, will be continuing draft coverage all through the season for 2020. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing?
Doing great, as always. Love chatting with you. Love talking football. Love the show. Love LA. Just love life. Things are great. Things are good.
Things are going very well right now, man, for both of us. I
Yeah.
love it.
It's fantastic. So we have a great show for you tonight. We are going to be joined by Chris Landry, who is also a host on the Bleav Network. He hosts the Bleav in Pro Football Film Room.
Yes, sir. That's Pro Football Film Room.
Cool. The Bleav in Pro Football Film Room podcast. Chris is a ex-NFL scout, did some executive work. He's done coaching, done consulting. He now is in charge of the LandryFootball.com, where they break it all down, do a lot of good stuff over there. So tons of insight, tons of inside knowledge. So we have an awesome conversation with him, just really breaking down the film of these college players that go on to the NFL and kind of what teams look for when they're building their draft board and how they evaluate specific positions going into the season. So without further ado, let's just get into that interview. Well, first I'll say we have that interview, and then we have a fun segment where we are going to break down our top 5 what-if draft scenarios. So we've done the what-if segment before. What if this player played on this team? What if this play didn't happen in this game? Blah, 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 blah. So this is our what-if draft scenario. So I'll kind of tease that, tell you more after the interview. But right now, let's get into our interview with Chris Landry.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Bleav in LA Football Podcast. We have a really cool interview today. We're really excited to have Chris Landry on the show. He is part of LandryFootball.com, and he is also a co-host of the Bleav in Pro Football Film Room, a part of the Bleav Podcast Network. Chris Landry is a former NFL scout. He's been in this business for a long time. We're really excited. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. Be better in about a week or so when we get the draft in the rearview mirror, but it's been really busy, and it's obviously a fun time of year for a lot of football fans.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, fans across America love draft time. I know Ryan and I both love it. Very busy for sure. But, it all comes to a point here in about 9-10 days. Well, Chris, we're going to dive right in here. And one question we really wanted to ask you with all your expertise and your background in this industry, one of the biggest things that NFL teams look for nowadays is that elusive franchise quarterback. So when you're breaking down film and you're watching a prospect on tape, what kind of things do you look for, or what telltale signs do you see that kind of gives you the idea that this guy can be a franchise quarterback at the next level?
Well, it's the toughest position because it's a developmental position. There are a lot of intangibles. And every position has critical factors. And the critical factors that are really important for the quarterback's position, you're looking at decision-making, vision, competitiveness, mental and physical toughness, so when you're looking at the intelligence, the decision making, you see some of that on tape, but you really need to spend a lot of time with them to really on the board to get a feel for what is their capacity to learn, what's their willingness to learn, Those are the things that are really important. For example, when Jamarcus Russell came out of LSU, and I was doing and still do consulting work for teams in the league, and in visiting with Al Davis and Bruce Kebrick with the Raiders before they took him, the thing that I stressed with him, because I knew the guy very, very well since he was in high school in Alabama, that he didn't have a great what I would call capacity to learn, and he really was very, very low in his willingness to learn. It's another way of saying he's at average intelligence and, quite frankly, way below average effort, competitiveness. It was lazy. And those are the things that physically he just jumped off the charts. But those are the things that really jump out at me. And if you don't have that, you're going to have a hard time succeeding regardless of the physical skills that you have. Now, with that said, you have to have physical skills necessary to play in the league as well, because there are a lot of guys that have all the intangibles that are off the charts. They're competitive, they're great vision, they're smart, but they don't have the physical skills to make all the throws. And that's where it becomes an issue. Accuracy is the most important physical quality for a quarterback. I think toughness and character and, arm strength is important because it affects your accuracy. And so, your ability to be able to throw certain routes, the seam route against cover two, if you don't have enough arm strength, you're going to have a hard time to be able to consistently make plays in that part of the game and against that style, against that type of defenses. So to me, it comes down to that: intelligence, vision, competitiveness, accuracy, toughness, and character, work ethic, arm strength, then athletic ability, the ability to protect the football, the ability to know that, hey, you are not there to make a play every time you're out there. Your job is first and foremost is to move the team, to take control of the team, and get the team in the end zone. And sometimes the best play is to not take a sack, but throw the football away and don't commit a turnover, because you can't win in the NFL by forcing the football and making mistakes. And so, all those things are important, and in confidence and poise, size and strength. And, the productions tell you certain things. I look at completion percentage, but what I look at more importantly than anything is accuracy percentage. Where did you throw the football on every route, and charting every throw and breaking it down into specific routes. So if it's a slant, a quick slant, is it 6 inches in front of the shoulder where you allow the receiver to catch the ball in stride, or is it in the numbers? Because if it's in the numbers and the receiver has to slow down, catch it in frame, that's just enough for the safety to make a play on the ball. So I look at not just completion percentage, but accuracy percentage, because you can have a perfect throw that's dropped. You can have a bad throw that's caught, and you've got to make the adjustment to say this guy is really good in this area or that. So all those things are incredibly important, and I put them in that order. That's the order of importance, and it is very difficult because how does that translate to the next level is what you're looking for. If it was just how productive a player was, then a guy like Danny Werfel would have been an all-pro in the NFL. He didn't have the physical qualities to make the transition to throw the football as accurately as he did in college.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, guys like him and Shaun White, who won a Heisman with Oklahoma and goes undrafted. So they have all those. But okay, Chris, kind of a two-part question here. They go kind of hand in hand, so I'll try to phrase it simply, I guess. But so on your last episode, which I enjoy, by the way, I've loved your guys' show so far since you've been on the network. You kind of talked about, and me and Talon have talked about this a lot when we talk about film and just the draft process, about how it's like almost like a relationship dating process throughout the off season, and on draft day it's the marriage, and that's when teams become married to these players, and you hope you did the work beforehand during the dating, during the speed dating, whatever you want to call it, doing your research. So, first part question. Of the quarterbacks, do you think everyone has their Dwayne Haskins tied with the Giants, Drew Lock with the Broncos? You personally, I don't know if you've heard from anyone inside buildings or just in your own personal opinion, are there any marriages that you see fitting? And the second part question, I know people talk about this draft class or this quarterback class in general as a lesser QB class, but do you see any of these guys having those qualities that you just alluded to earlier that have the ability to become franchise QBs?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think there are some. I think that there are definitely some teams that like these quarterbacks. Are they in a position to take them? That's some of them are, some of them are not, and that's what you don't know. You always, I think, in the league are careful to tip your hand, but we'll know in about a week, exactly who really liked who the most, or who's just saying what they want to say to get that out there and have other plans in mind. I'll say this, that, for example, Dwayne Haskins is a really good pocket passer. I think he's got innate accuracy. He doesn't have much football in him. Now, that's the other thing that's really changed, guys. It used to be, if a guy didn't have 20 starts as a college guy, what are you really evaluating? He doesn't have enough. Now nobody has, because they're all coming out early, and so they're all projects. And yes, they're all under a rookie deal, but the real reason, there are a couple of reasons why they go a little bit higher, because it's supply and demand, the draft is. And oftentimes guys say, look, if we like him in the top of the second, we just soon invest in him, meaning that quarterback, whoever it is. Let's go into the bottom of the first round and get him. We get an extra year to evaluate him, because you get that fifth-year option, and you're going to probably need it, because a quarterback takes we already determined that this guy's a bust and this guy's great. It takes about 20 starts to truly know what a quarterback is. Now, you have some indications along the way, but I think that a guy like Dwayne Haskins has very little experience because he's so young, but he has the physical skills as a pocket passer to be very good. Kyler Murray is a little completely different animal. He's a water bug athlete. He has got a really good arm, but you have to embrace what he is. He's not going to be a guy that you play under center and work on 3- and 5-step drops, because he's too short. But he can do different things outside the pocket. You have to be willing to embrace it. And that's kind of the point that you're kind of, jump off point you're talking about. Is that what you want? Well, if that's what the Cardinals want with Cliff Kingsbury, and then that's what they'll do. I don't know that they're maybe more than a half a dozen teams that would be interested in doing that with Kyler Murray. But it really doesn't matter. It's what you want. I know when I drafted Steve McNair, it wasn't like a universal, everybody thought he was going to be really good. In fact, I didn't think he was going to be great. I thought he'd be good. And I knew we inherited a bad team in Houston with the Oilers, and we needed a quarterback, and we didn't make that decision until we spent an entire day with him in Mississippi, that he was going to be tough, and he could be a leader, and he could be a quality starting quarterback in the league. And I think everybody has to make that decision. I would expect that Haskins and Murray probably lock, are probably going in the first round, and a guy like Daniel Jones is more of a second-round value that will probably go in the first round as well, because of what I just said. You like him, you're probably going to need to move back into the first round to get them, or take them late in the first round, because of supply and demand. And if you don't have one, you're going to be a little bit desperate to move up. And of course you get that fifth year. So I think we could see 4 of them go. I think all of them can be developed in time, but I think we talk a lot about these quarterbacks as if they're a finished product. None of them are even close to being a finished product. So a lot of it is how, when we draft these guys in a week from now, week and a half from now, what we're doing is that's going to be the starting point. And how well you develop those guys and put a team around them is going to ultimately determine how good they can be.
Yeah, man. The more we talk about this, man, there is just so much that goes in to breaking down these quarterback films and really trying to decipher which guys will fit, which guys won't, who has it now, who will have it later. So I really love talking about this, and I just want to ask you, Chris, kind of put you on the spot here. If you were, in an active draft room in a week and a half, who would be your QB1? Who are you pitching for? Who are you really wanting your GM to get after?
Well, it would depend upon who my head coach is and what type of offense we were running. But to answer your question in short, without having that specific team, I would take Dwayne Haskins. I just think he's a little bit better as a pocket passer, and I think he can fit a little bit more across the board what you're going to do. Now, it does not mean that I don't think Kyler Murray can be successful. Heck, if they needed a quarterback, which they obviously do not, you take a guy like that with an Andy Reid. I could see Kyler Murray doing some things that are a shorter version of a Patrick Mahomes if you look at it. But not everybody is equipped to do that, prepared to do that. I think Dwayne Haskins has a little bit more of the qualities you look for, at least coming from the pocket.
Yeah. I won't say I disagree with you at all on that, actually. And I have another question for you, Chris. When it comes to that quarterback play, we've seen it more recently. I mean, we saw it with Aaron Rodgers. He sat for a few years behind Brett Favre. We saw it with Patrick Mahomes. He sat behind Alex Smith for a year. Do you think that's kind of the way the league's going now, where you draft a quarterback before you need to thrust him into a starting role? I mean, you look at Josh Rosen and Sam Darnold, the rookies last year who started from day one, really kind of struggled a bit. But then Baker Mayfield, who started 3 or 4 or 5 games in. Do you think the league's kind of shifting to a world where these top-rated quarterbacks need that year, need that 2 years to kind of sit behind somebody and learn? Or do you think there's still quarterbacks out there that can come from college and go straight in and really light up the NFL from year one?
Well, I think 2 things. One, you see certain guys have success early, and there's a reason for that. The teams around them are pretty decent. You mentioned Baker Mayfield. That team's gotten a little bit better, and, even last year they had some pieces, and they were kind of in the dumps, and he just led a little bit of a spark, and it worked, and that's fine. Now, again, everybody's got him and Mahomes, and Mahomes is another case of a lot of talent. So if you look at the team, that players like that maybe could add a spark, what teams are doing now in the league is taking some of the concepts that these quarterbacks have coming out of college and tailoring what makes them comfortable. It increases their chance of early success. And so it gets them on the field earlier. And very often in the old days where you could have your veteran quarterback and you can sit a guy for a long time, well, you don't have that luxury today. So what you try to do is get them on the field earlier by simplifying things and making it more friendly to what they did in college. That's great. But long range, defenses catch up to that. So as you're kind of getting them on the field early, then what you do is you kind of gradually add more things to it to where you're not as predictable to defenses. And that's why oftentimes when people say guys have sophomore slumps, it's really not a slump. It's just that people have a read on them on what they're doing, and they have to make some adjustments from what they did and had success earlier. So teams are doing that. But if you look at other ones, yeah, some guys really struggle. I thought Sam Darnold did a really good job last year, but the numbers weren't as good, but the team around him wasn't as good either. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know that Sam Darnold won't be the better quarterback of last year's draft when it's all said and done. And the answer to that is going to be directly correlated into how well the Jets do building a team around him relative to, say, what the Browns are doing with Baker Mayfield. Now, the Browns are way ahead of the game because the roster's getting better. John Dorsey's done a really good job. They've added really good receivers. They got a really good-looking roster. And Baker Mayfield is going to do a good job. I don't know that Sam Darnold wouldn't be doing that in Cleveland also. So a lot of it has to do with the quarterback is such a huge importance, but the players around them are equally as important into the quarterback's success or lack thereof. And so oftentimes guys are really talented and have abilities, but the play around them is not really good. The quarterback tends to gamble a lot, take a lot of chances, and all of a sudden you're not very good. Name me a quarterback in the league that physically is better than Matthew Stafford. But they've not done a very good job, consistently in that organization of putting good talent around him. There are a lot of problems. He tends to force the ball. Therefore, he becomes part of the problem because he's trying to bail his team out. I mean, all you need to do is look at a Phillip Rivers or an Aaron Rodgers. When the team around them are pretty good, those guys are great quarterbacks in the league. But there are times that a Phillip Rivers or Aaron Rodgers look pretty average in the league because the play around them wasn't as good. They were forcing the football, and that's when all the turnovers start to take place. So I think a lot of it is you have to evaluate the quarterback individually, yes, but within the team, within the concept of the team and how you're coaching and building a team around them. And so I think what people are trying to do is, look, we need to get them on the field early, as early as we can, because we need to know. We can't have them sit for 3 years, 4 years, and then by the time their rookie contract is up, we don't know what we got because we don't have enough snaps for them. But if you've got a quarterback and you can sit them, that's the best way, because that's the best way to groom them. But sometimes you don't have that luxury. So when you don't have that luxury, get him on the field, get him some things that he's comfortable with, allow him to make plays, and if you have a good enough team around him, you can have success. If not, he's going to struggle. But then you have to make sure that you keep the confidence level up and continue to build around the quarterback and not give up hope. Everybody, again, is so quick to say somebody is a bust and somebody's great. I mean, you guys are very familiar with Jared Goff. Mm-hmm. He was a bust. Hey, now he's the answer. Hey, wow, imagine that, different coach, different personnel around him. All of a sudden, quarterback looks a lot better. That's a big, big part of what you're doing when you're building a team and assessing the quarterback within the context of that.
It's funny you say that, Chris. Out here in LA, after that last season with, or I should say Goff's rookie season with Fisher at the helm, there were not fans, and maybe you heard this, there was legit radio personalities that supposedly know the game of football, calling for Goff to be either cut or at least benched and have Sean Mannion be the starter of the future. It was just hilarious hearing that after playing 9 games as a rookie.
Well, and then just I'm going to give you another one. I'm going to remind folks, some people may not remember this, but Rick Meyer was a rookie of the year in this league.
Yeah, with Seattle.
He was a rookie of the year. And they made a lot of changes. Now, what they did was they simplified things. They did a very nice job. But the organization kind of sputtered after that. They didn't do a good job around him, and they didn't build upon that early success, and he became what people would consider a flop. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that, because I played against them both. Everybody, I mean, every media person, no one would admit to it now, everybody said, well, I would say 60% of the people said prior to the draft, Ryan Leaf over Peyton Manning. And after their rookie year, there is no doubt Ryan Leaf had the better year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll leave it. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And then, but it doesn't. Okay, that doesn't make a career. Mm-hmm. And that's why. Okay, look at Ryan. He went off the deep end. Peyton Manning, mentally tough. They didn't have anybody. Talk with Polian and Jim Mora at the time. They didn't have anybody. They threw Peyton right in. They weren't very good. The guy threw like 33 picks as a rookie. Mm-hmm. And people said the same thing. Oh, he's got a name, whatever. But they built a team around him. They fought through him. You'll wonder if it would have been a bad organization without good people, and had they, changed coaches every 3 years. I mean, you wonder what would have happened. And it makes you wonder, is every one of those quarterbacks that some of these teams have taken, have they been all bad, or some of them just have been misdeveloped and mismanaged, and that may have contributed to it? And sometimes you can't see where one ends and one begins. Mm-hmm. And so that sometimes that has a great deal to do with, well, we knew, for example, we couldn't play Steve McNair early, so we sat him, and that was our plan. I think having a plan and having patience, there's a reason why certain teams seemingly pick in the top 5 or 6 every year, because mm-hmm. they're usually bad organizations. That the answer is, well, we're going to draft these guys. This is our philosophy. This is what we're going to do. And then 2 years, they start firing people because it's not working. Mm-hmm. And then so now they've got another philosophy, and then they never can ever build towards anything because it's a constant philosophy, and you're never building towards anything because you're constantly breaking it off every 2 years because of media pressure, fan pressure, and it's why you're not very good, quite frankly. And stability of an organization has as much to do with the development of any player, and certainly the quarterback, as anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Hit the nail right on the head there, and a so many factors go into the development just in general. So that's why you see some of those topsy-turvy organizations continuing with the overturn. But I want to talk a little bit on the defense side of the ball, get kind of your takes maybe on some edge players, and since that's kind of the position comparable to the importance in today's NFL. But before that, kind of just more of a, I guess, fun question, if you will. And correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm incorrect here, I apologize. But you were with the original Cleveland Browns organization pre their move to Baltimore, correct?
Yeah, I was a college coach at LSU and recruiting coordinator. I got hired by Bill Belichick. Worked on the staff with him, among others. Him and Nick Saban was on that staff, and a lot of good people on that staff.
Yeah.
Worked there for a while, and then moved on and ran the scouting combine for a while, and had that opportunity. And then moved to Houston and ran their scouting department for a while, and then moved to Tennessee when the club moved there. And since then, I moved back home to deal with elderly parents and sick parents, and continued at that time to do consulting work for teams in the NFL and college programs, and doing coaching searches, scouting work, coaching, consulting, and then obviously doing the website LandryFootball.com. So that's kind of the quick version of kind of where I've been and how I've gotten there.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. What a great career and still going. But so I'm sure you've been asked this hundreds of times, so I apologize. You probably get sick of answering it. But just out of curiosity, working with guys like Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, obviously them getting their start back then, and we see the achievements that they have today. What was it like kind of being in those rooms with them, or were they different characters than we see on TV? Or obviously that was many, many years ago, so things have changed. But what was it like in those early years working with guys like Mr. Belichick?
Well, Bill Belichick is not like you see him on TV. He's very funny. He's a kind of sharp-witted, self-deprecating, and very, very personable. I still have a good relationship with him. Do a lot of work for them, and have when in New England. Just a brilliant football mind. I didn't realize that, as I always tell people, did you know it? I could see that those guys did things from a detail standpoint that were unique, because prior to that, I had actually done some part-time scouting for one of the scouting arms of the NFL, Bleav. So I've been around the pro game and the pro scouting game for a while, and they did things a little differently. And I think it was a combination of what they did with the Giants when he was there, and then some of the things that he implemented. That I've referenced critical factors of each position. Well, all those things, the things that Bill took place, and his attention to detail was incredible. I can remember him asking me like 8 or 9 questions about our kickoff guy in training camp, in more detail than I can ever imagine. I can remember going through a 9-hour interview where, I was just dead on my feet, exhausted, going through not only how to evaluate a player, but at the time, and was going to do some quality control work, how we break down film and what I saw and how I handled recruiting at LSU and all this. And so you could see the detail. And he inherited a bad team, and people always classify it as Bully failed in Cleveland. And it's funny how the narrative gets, stamped without anybody doing their homework. He built that team from nothing, because it had to be completely rebuilt. And he built it into a playoff team. And they were really good, and they beat Parcells and the Patriots. And I don't know that many people remember this, but the next year they were picked to go to the Super Bowl. Now, that doesn't mean anything, but that gives you an idea how favorite they were and how good they were. And that was the year that Mr. Modell moved them to Baltimore, and everything collapsed. And he got fired. And then, of course, he goes back with Parcells and a couple of stops, and then the rest is history. But brilliant football mind. Nick was the defensive coordinator. Really thought the world of him. I recommended him for the job at LSU, and I always got the sense that he was going to be a guy because he had a lot of ties and interest in college ball, but he did it with a pro mindset that I thought he would be successful. So, listen, I thought they'd be successful. Now, did I think at that time when I was sitting there and, Belichick's just directly on my right and Nick is directly across the table from me, did I know at that time that we'd be saying, that guy right there is the greatest college football coach of all time, and that guy is the greatest pro football coach of all time? Absolutely not. I mean, there's no way I would have ever dreamed that. But I thought both of those guys had it. Thought they were really special.
Chris, if there was a Mount Rushmore of football coaches, you would be etched in there somewhere since you were in that room with them, I think.
I'd just be some a dirty garbage just hanging off around my Rushmore. I certainly I was very, very blessed, and quite frankly owe a lot of what I've been able to do in my career to what I learned from them. There's no question about it. Those guys, the great Bill Orensbarger, who coached for Don Shula and coached those great no-name defenses, was one of my first mentors that I coached for and invented the 34 defense. And, there are a lot of people. And I think you're a product of your experiences. And that's definitely, any success I've had, I owe to them, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's almost a perfect segue, Chris, when you mentioned that 34 defense. We'll briefly touch on edge rushers, and we'll get you out of here. We know you got a show later on to do. But I bring up edge rushers, and in your history, the athleticism and just the raw, freakish talent that you see from these edge rushers nowadays, rather it be a 4-3 hand in the dirt defensive end or a stand-up 3-4 edge rusher, did you ever think that getting after the quarterback and the pass rushing abilities and the emphasis that teams put on it nowadays? I mean, I've seen mock drafts for the first 5 picks, there's 4 edge rushers going. In your entire time, did you kind of see this coming where edge rushing was going to be so pivotal in the game of football, especially with that implement of the 3-4 defense? Or, I mean, did this kind of take you by shock, or where did you see that edge rushing emphasis coming from down the line?
Well, it was parallel to the passing game evolvement, where the passing game became more important. Well, then the way you handle the passing game, and we just talked about the importance of quarterbacks. Well, left tackles became pretty important for protecting the quarterback, and what's the best way to stop that quarterback? Rush the quarterback. So, yes, it absolutely evolved as a money-making position, if you will, and that's the way it's evolved at the high school level. And you're seeing a lot of those guys that want to rush the passer and want to be guys that can make a difference there. And so they go into college with that idea and mindset, and they go in with the idea that the elite guys that do a very good job and rush the passer, they make a ton of money in the league. And so that becomes emphasized along with the passing game because that's the way you have to do it. So with that, you have a lot of guys in numbers. Now, some of the bodies types are different. You got a Nick Bosa that's just incredibly, guys like that are incredibly nimble and can contort their body and really work edges well. And then you've got speed guys like a Josh Allen, who last year at this time was just a good player, and he just blossomed at Kentucky. And, Cleveland Farrell, that's a little bit more of a point of attack guy. A Montez Sweat, a little bit more of a straight line guy. And, so, yeah, they're in numbers because they're in numbers coming into college. It transfers into numbers outside of college. Now, the thing is the college systems, it doesn't matter if you're playing the 30 front or a 40 front. Everybody in nickels in a pass rush situation, you can rush from a stand-up 2-point stance, 3-point stance, but the ability to rush the quarterback is king. And so it has been for a while. I can remember drafting Javon Curse. We wanted him so bad in that draft that we had to have him. We tried to move up to get him, and he fell in our lap at 16. And Javon was an inside backer at Florida. He wasn't a pass rusher, but we knew that he could be a pass rusher. Right. And we took him 16th overall because of that. And we don't go to the Super Bowl if it wasn't for him, I can tell you, in his impact that rookie year. So that's led to a lot of numbers and a lot of players that, you can go deep into this, first round, early second round. I've got 8 guys that at edge rushers that would be anywhere from high second round value to, and when I look at first-round value. I've only got 23 first-round grades. So you're going to see a couple of those guys that are going to, just by pure numbers, go in the first round just on the edge rushers alone. So it is a premium position. It is developed that way, and even at the defensive tackle position. You know, you've got guys that are point of attack, strong physical run defenders, but those guys that can get to the quarterback at the defensive tackle position are becoming almost as important, because what offenses are doing to try to counteract the edge rushers is to work the quick passing game. The 3-step drop, the quick 5-step drop, well, the best way to get to the quarterback then against that is to get right up through the middle. To get the Drew Breeses and the Tom Brady's of the world they get the ball out so quickly is through the A-gap. So getting the guys that are the athletic guys that can push the pocket and work the swim move and be right in the lap of the quarterback, those become valuable. So that's why the great defensive tackles, the great defensive ends are just behind quarterbacks in terms of importance. And, of course, you need those in numbers because unlike the quarterback position where only one plays, you got to rotate those defensive guys because you have to have guys that can play, a certain amount of snaps and get fresh a little bit. So you have to have quality guys that can come in. So in the fourth quarter, you're fresh. You can still rush the passer from inside and outside.
Yeah. So, I love how you explain the top four, how they have different skill sets, even though they play pretty much the same position. So put you on the spot again, like we do with quarterbacks. Obviously, it permits to situation and whatever the team is running, but just based on the film and what you've evaluated, who's your top edge rushers in this year's draft?
Well, Nick Bosa, if you're okay with him medically, if your medical staff's okay, he's the best pass rusher in this draft. Josh Allen of Kentucky, Cleveland Farrell of Clemson, Montez Sweat of Mississippi State. Then I think there's some value there with Jalaka Polite. Brian Burns is some intrigue. I think L.J. Collier is very good at TCU. And although he's had a tad bit of off-the-field issues that have to be vetted, remember the name Jalen Ferguson, Louisiana Tech. He's really, really good. But guys, I can tell you there's some value into the late second round. Joe Jackson of Miami, Charles Omayu from Texas, Jose Jimenez from Old Dominion, Zach Gallen of Boston College has some value. So a guy like a Chase Winovich that can help. The Isaiah Buggs and Max Crosby. Paul Granderson of Wyoming, Anthony Nelson of Iowa. You can get some guys into the third round, maybe even top of the fourth, that can help you situationally. And football's become a situational game, particularly defensively. If you can rush the passer, you can have ability to do one thing very, very well. They will find a way in certain situations to get you in. And that's the real key to good drafting is finding what a guy can do and building around it. I still remember to this day having a really good player out of Arizona years ago that I liked a lot, but he was an undersized 260-pound nose guard, and no one can figure out where to play him and what to do with him. But Bill Belichick saw that this guy was smart. He was versatile. He was tough. He could find a role for him. Teddy Bruschi became a really good cornerstone player for him in New England because he could do so many things. So if you get a guy on the field that has some ability to make plays for you, you can get him on the field effectively, helping your defense, and then you can build upon that. And that's where finding a guy that fits what you want to do and then maybe adding, more to his plate, now you got really good value down the road. And I think we're going to see that with a number of guys. And I just mentioned those guys, those were ends. But, man, there's the same amount of numbers, even more so at defensive tackle that'll go 9 guys with second-round grades or higher. So there's definitely going to be a defensive influence on this draft very, very early and often here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, Chris, this was fun. We love talking draft. We love talking film. It's something we have great passion for. So it was a blast to get your insight from someone that has done it. So we truly appreciate you coming on and chatting with us.
Well, thanks a bunch for having me. Congrats on the great job y'all doing with our podcast. And invite everybody to check us out at LandryFootball.com and certainly our podcast, and we'd love to catch up with you guys soon.
Absolutely, yeah. Anyone out there listening, if you're really looking for a good outlet for great film breakdown, great insight from someone that's actually done it, LandryFootball.com is definitely a place to check out. I've been on there; it's awesome. So keep up the great work, Chris. We appreciate you, and we'll definitely we'll be in touch down the line, and we'll do some cross work again.
Hey, thank you so much. Y'all have a great one. Appreciate you.
You too, Chris. And if you're ever out in L.A., the beer's on us, buddy.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll take you up on that.
Well, huge thanks to Chris Landry. What a fun interview, talking film town. I know you probably enjoyed that. I know I did. But yeah, we love talking film, talking player analysis and breakdown.
Oh yeah, and it was great just to. I mean, I learned a lot just talking to Chris. I mean, I've things I watch for, but I don't know exactly what I'm watching. But just to hear Chris actually put it into words, I think that's the hardest part about like when you are watching film and breaking down what a prospect looks like on tape. You know what you're seeing is good or bad, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily know the right verbiage or the right lingo to use. But Chris kind of, I mean, it just rambled off, and it just goes to show his experience and his time spent in the game. And just it was awesome to just to kind of soak that in for the few minutes we had with him.
Oh, totally. And I obviously we want to promote the show, and we want as many people to listen as possible. But I really am going to try to, I guess, promote this to as many people that are interested in like the draft and want to maybe move up in the draft society or the draft community. Just because someone like Chris, with the knowledge he has and the background he has, is a guy you really want to listen to, and if you can connect with him. And so I think that the fact that he was able to come on our show and kind of talk to us was awesome. But I think it can be huge for young people coming up that want to watch film and write player profiles and do this and really learn the verbiage. So, yeah, huge thanks to Chris Landry. I still think we kind of chatted about this off mic, but it was just crazy. Here we are talking to someone that sat at the same table as Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, and here he is on talking to the coach in the Don.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling that in a 24-hour span, this guy could talk to Bill Belichick and then talk to us in the same day. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, Coach Bill and then Coach Graff in the same breath.
Yeah. Oh boy, that is a big drop off.
Yeah. Okay, you got Coach Bill and Coach Graff, and you got the Don of college football, and just the Don.
There is no other Don.
One and the same.
Let's just be honest.
All
There's
right.
there's one and only.
Well, hey.
He's the Don.
Well, I appreciate that if you're referring to me. I don't know if you are, but
You are the one and only. Of course I am.
Well, great. I appreciate that. Well, cool. Well, yeah, big thanks. But let's move on to the rest of the show. This is gonna be a fun one. 5 draft what ifs. So this could be players that got drafted into a bad situation. What if they had been drafted by a different team? Players that got drafted into a good situation. What if they got drafted by a bad team? I have some just a team on my list. Throw out a little teaser there of a situation that I'll explain it when we get to it. But as always, we'll rank it 5 through 1. I know you're excited, Talon, so I'm gonna let you start it off.
All right, man. These were kind of hard to rank because I had a lot of fun doing every single one of them.
Very hard to rank. I'll agree with you there. So I think it's more like 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, but
I
technically
completely agree with you.
Technically 5 to 1.
Yes, I agree completely. So I'll start off. My number 5, the Baltimore Ravens, in the year 2001. So the 2001 draft, they had the 31 overall draft pick because they were coming off of a Super Bowl victory. They had yet to have 32. Houston Texans were not around yet, but they drafted Todd Heap. He had a great career. Todd Heap was a very good tight end for Baltimore, went to multiple Pro Bowls. He was an all-pro player. So there's nothing wrong with that pick. Let me just say that right now. But a pick after Todd Heap, the then San Diego Chargers took Drew Brees.
Mm-hmm.
What if the Ravens had the wherewithal, because they had just won a Super Bowl with a defense, and they had rolled with like Trent Dilfer, and I believe that offseason they had signed Elvis Grbac. They had Randall Cunningham on that roster. But what if they knew that their future plans with that defense they had in place, they needed a young quarterback to take over at some point, and what if they had taken Drew Brees with that 31st overall pick? So now you got Drew Brees, who's probably he's not going to go in day one starter. You're probably rolling with Elvis Grbac since you just paid him. You got another veteran, Randall Cunningham, sitting there. But the way that season went for the Ravens, it would not have been long before Drew Brees was thrust into a starting role. And with that defense, and with the supporting cast, with that coaching staff that the Ravens had, Drew Brees and the Baltimore Ravens, with Ray Lewis on defense, and obviously one of the greatest defenses of all time, Baltimore would probably have a few more Super Bowls in their trophy case had Drew Brees ended up a Raven and not a Charger.
Yeah. Oh, that is a huge what if. We could have been looking at the Ravens could have been potentially the Patriots before the Patriots. Well, I mean, I guess that was around the exact same time period, pretty much the same year, or what was it?
Yep.
A year after
Uh,
the Patriots won their first.
Yeah, it was a year after Brady was drafted.
Okay.
So so that draft happened in whatever May or April, and then Patriots won that Super Bowl that following year.
Yeah, but that would have been. I mean, you consider the biggest challenger for the Patriots through Brady's tenure were the Manning-led Colts and Broncos, and then aside from them would probably be Roethlisberger-led Steelers. But if you would have
easily, yeah,
and that would have been probably it in the AFC. But if you would have thrown Drew Brees on the Baltimore Ravens, that would have been another huge contender and probably arguably the biggest contender there at competitor. So yeah, that's a great one. I love it.
Yeah. That was I didn't realize that. I mean, in Raven, I'm always kind of shocked that didn't happen because when you have that quarterback room that you had and you know how good your defense is, why not? I mean, maybe they just didn't have a high grade on Brees. I don't know, but oh man, it's kind of hard to think about passing up on a kid like that because he was very productive in college.
Yeah.
And to be the first pick in the second round, obviously he's people wanted to have him. It's kind of weird the Ravens didn't go that route.
Yeah. The old Boilermaker. But is it really that weird considering how we always joke on the Ravens taking so many damn tight ends? And who was it they took instead of Drew Brees? A damn tight end.
Oh, that's perfect.
That's going to be their demise. Everyone talks about Ozzie Newsome, great GM, which he is, but that guy's got to have like 25 tight ends he's taken over his GM career.
We should go and count up at how many tight ends have over the years.
Oh, man, that's just too perfect.
Great.
He took a tight end over Drew Brees. Too perfect. Well, okay. I'll go ahead and so for my fifth, I think I had this a little higher, but it ties in better because it's that exact same draft class, and mine's a little more that what you did was great because it was more realistic. Like they just happened to not pick him; they took someone ahead. Mine would be much more speculative and kind of looking more hindsight 2020. So that was okay. Forgive me. This is the next draft. So 2002 draft. That was a 2001 draft. You said right? Okay, so 2002 draft.
Correct.
So this was them not taking, obviously, Drew Brees, which they didn't. And so they're going, on the heels of they had just, this is the Ravens speaking of, had just won the Super Bowl 2 years prior, and then the draft you were referring to that next season, I believe they went like 6-10 or 7-9 or 8-8, right around that mark. So they're kind of in that middle of the pack to late 20s in their draft pick. That's the year the Houston Texans were then born. Took David Carr first overall, and David Carr. There's been kind of this polling arguing throughout time that had he been in a different situation, he may have actually been a successful quarterback. But considering you're the first overall pick for an expansion team, first time head coach, basically Swiss cheese offensive line, like really no talent at all on the roster. And yet he was still able to, in 72 starts, throw for almost 15,000 yards and 65 touchdowns. Yeah, he had 71 picks. He was sacked 76 times his rookie year. So, I mean, the chips were just all stacked against him. I'm not saying he would have been a Hall of Famer. But let's just say that same scenario we're talking about Baltimore, that they were really just a quarterback away from being a dynasty because of that defense. But when you're rolling with Trent Dilfer, Elvis Grbac, Kyle Bowler, all these very mediocre to subpar NFL quarterbacks, and a guy like David Carr, if he were to fall to that 22, 23 spot, or they were to move up and take him, could have had an extremely different career, especially on the roster at that time. I think they also had like Jeff Blake and Chris Redmond, like just bad quarterbacks. So David Carr, again, maybe not have been a great quarterback. I think his career trajectory would have been so much higher had he not been taken first overall by a brand new expansion team, Houston Texans, and had he gone to a team like the Baltimore Ravens. So that was a team I actually picked him to go to, so it's kind of funny that you were talking about them prior, so it was like fitting.
I like that. I've thought a lot about it because David Carr What a poor situation. I mean, obviously you want to be the number one overall pick, but man, that is a tough situation. And a brand new, not just a bad team, a brand new team,
Yeah.
a team that has never taken the field together, a team with brand new coaches, everything is just brand spanking new. Yeah, that's hard. That'd be hard for a veteran quarterback to step into, let alone a rookie quarterback who's 23, 24 years old. Yeah, that's tough.
Oh, absolutely. And it looks, and we've seen, and I have another one on this list, maybe you do too, but it kind of shows that, I mean, 32 teams, I don't think we'll be adding any more teams in the NFL, but if they do, it's almost as crazy as it sounds with the first pick. Either you don't take a quarterback or you swear by it that you are not starting him in year one or maybe even year two, because there's just not enough of a nucleus and a good core that, and quarterbacks, the position is so motivation driven and based on kind of early success. Otherwise, you kind of get rattled depending on your pedigree as a quarterback. And so it's bad if you have just that rough of a roster to start. So, but yeah, David Carr, I think, could have been a much different story had he gone to a different situation.
Oh, for sure. And just looking back, I wasn't aware of this until I just looked it up, but Ravens fans might have a problem with that. If you look at who they did take in 2002.
Yeah, they took Ed Reed. So
yeah, for David Carr's sake, it would have been great, but Ravens fans may not like that scenario.
I think they're okay with it. Yeah. And they got they got Flacco like 4 years later and won a Super Bowl with him, so it worked out okay. It worked out okay for him. But for Carr's sake, it would have been much better if he had that defense to play for.
Absolutely agree with you on that point.
Yep.
All right, so my number 4. So we're gonna throw it back to 2007.
Throw it back.
The Oakland Raiders are sitting there with the number 1 overall pick, and a lot of people, obviously the Raiders themselves included, thought they needed to take a quarterback number 1 overall. Well, and they did. They took Jamarcus Russell out of LSU, who ended up being one of the biggest busts of all time. And actually, we spoke about that in the interview with Chris earlier, and Chris even talked about how physically Jamarcus had it all. But when it came to, the actual intangibles and the off the field and all that, well, you heard it in the interview. He just didn't have it. So What if – I'm going to throw something out there for you. So in 2005, Andrew Walter was drafted in the 3rd round by the Raiders. And he spent his entire rookie year, so the entire 05 season, he was hurt. And then in 2006, he split starts with Aaron Brooks, the veteran from New Orleans who had come over to Oakland to bridge the gap or whatever. So small sample size for Andrew Walter. So 2006 season led into the 2007 draft, which is when they took Jamarcus Russell. What if Oakland wanted to give Andrew Walter one more year? They wanted a full season to see what Andrew could do as a starter, going into the off season as a starter, all that stuff. So instead of taking Jamarcus Russell, they take Calvin Johnson, who went number 2 to the Detroit Lions. So in another scenario, Joe Thomas was also in that draft, but in 2004, Robert Gallery was drafted. So Robert Gallery was the established left tackle for the Oakland Raiders.
Out of Iowa.
So now you have Andrew Walter. You're rolling with Walter. You have a left tackle, so you don't need to protect him. So what do you need to do? You need to give him a franchise wide receiver, someone he can rely on.
Get him some damn talent. Get him some damn talent.
Right? You go out and get Calvin Johnson, number 1 overall. Becomes the 2nd receiver ever to be drafted number 1 overall, other than Keyshawn Johnson. So now you have Andrew Walter, Calvin Johnson, Robert Gallery. You think you have a pretty good offense. Well, 2007 still doesn't go the way they planned. Andrew Walter, they realize, is not your franchise quarterback. They end up with the number 1 overall pick again. 2008, they take Matt Ryan, number 1 overall. So now you got Matt Ryan, Calvin Johnson, and Robert Gallery as your left tackle. That offense is pretty scary. So now the Oakland Raiders, instead of spending the entire 2000s decade, the late 2000s decade and into the early 2010s as the laughingstock of the NFL, now you have an actual offense to build around with Matty Ice, Calvin Johnson, Megatron, and Robert Gallery as your franchise left tackle. And things would look a lot different today had Oakland done that instead of taking Jamarcus Russell, number 1 overall.
Damn. That was some high-level what if and analysis right there.
Yeah, that a lot of what ifs. But had one pick been different, it wouldn't be that far fetched.
No, I mean, like you said, they roll with Andrew Walter or Brian Drew in this case from draft day, the veteran, and he doesn't pan out, so they get the number 1 pick overall, and there's Matty Ice.
There's Matty Ice waiting to be picked up.
Because Matt went 3rd overall in his actual draft, correct?
I believe 3rd or 4th.
Yeah, I believe so. So, and wow, they would have been set.
They would have been pretty solid there. I mean, obviously,
you would think.
still have the coaching issues and
yeah, you would think,
and all that. I mean, I think Lane Kiffin was calling the shots back then. I don't even know if Lane Kiffin could win with that group, but hey, nonetheless, they would have been a lot better shape to win had they gone that route.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. That's a good what if. So, well played, sir. All right, let's see. How do I want to do my 4th one? Okay, well, I'll just do it. This is I don't have a ton of analysis on it. It's just kind of simple. So, we go into the 1995 drafts. We're going way back to the 90s. Flip those cargo shorts on, flip the jeans around like crisscross and start jumping.
Jump.
That's right. If you want to jump.
Oh,
So, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, new owner, Malcolm Glazer, comes in, of the Glazer family, buys the Buccaneers, kind of wants to transform the organization from what was, if you remember, the early 90s, Buccaneers were the true laughingstock of the NFL. They were bad. Had those nasty creamsicle uniforms. I believe one season they went, I don't think they went completely defeated, but they only won like one game. So they were bad, very bad. So he came in to essentially, he didn't clean house in this first year, but he was like, okay, we're going to see how this year goes, and then I'm going to clean house so it doesn't go bad. So his first draft as owner, in their first round, 12th overall, they got Warren Sapp. 28th overall, they got Derek Brooks. So that first round, probably their 2 most iconic and important players of the entire franchise. Both of them Hall of Famers. Both of them obviously on the team that went on to the Super Bowl. That very next year, they got Tony Dungy as a coach. They changed their uniforms, yada, yada, yada. So my what if isn't really that deep of analysis. I'm not saying different teams, but just what if the Buccaneers didn't have new ownership under Malcolm Glazer and didn't draft simultaneously 2 of the greatest Hall of Fame defensive players onto one roster in one round. Crazy that they were able to get that in one round together, and then obviously the rest is history, what they were able to do in the late 90s, early 2000s, and their defensive dominance. And obviously those 2 guys, along with Rondé Barber, who they got, I believe, 2 or 3 years later, became like the staple of that team. So, yeah, just a what if they went a different direction. And I think at the time their quarterback was Trent Dilfer, I believe. So what if they decided to draft a quarterback instead at 12? So, yeah, just a pretty simple one, but pretty crazy they were able to get both those guys in one draft in the first round.
Oh, that's unbelievable. I mean, to have 2 first-round picks. I mean, how many times have you looked back at the drafts and even the Colts when they had the number 1 and number 2 overall pick and they were both busts, and to land. I mean, it's hard enough to land a Hall of Famer in an entire draft, but to land 2 in the first round,
yeah,
that just doesn't happen. But yeah, so that was, I mean, in and of itself was remarkable. But yeah, so Tampa Bay had not done that. Who knows? Maybe they even relocate at some point in the future, because I don't remember when they were established. Late 70s, I believe.
Yeah, well, what's funny you say that is, like I said, Malcolm Glazer took over in 95, and that was on the heels, or I guess before the heels. So it was right before the Browns moved to Baltimore. And so during that time, that transition of, changing coaches, Malcolm Glazer had actually considered moving the team to Cleveland to become the new basically the new Browns team in Cleveland, and then ended up getting the city kind of fought for them to stay, and then he struck a stadium deal, got Raymond James Stadiums, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, it's funny you bring that up, that they considered moving, but then obviously this draft and their kind of quick turnaround obviously helped them stay rooted in Tampa Bay.
Oh, for sure, yeah, and I don't think Tampa Bay's going to relocate now. They have a pretty good following in Tampa Bay. They have a pretty solid fan base, but yeah, it wouldn't be that far fetched back then had that happened, had Sapp and Brooks not shown up.
Yeah, because
So, that's a good one.
that'd have been a few more years of just bad football, and that's when
Yeah.
it's time to move. So
Yep, I like that. That's a good one. I always forget that, or maybe not forget, just don't think about it, whatever word you want to say, but that the Tampa Bay had Sapp and Brooks in the same round. Even
I know.
it's
Crazy.
still it's just mind-boggling to think about that.
Crazy. Well done. So
All right. So my third,
yes, sir.
I think it's going to be related to one that you probably have on your list, but it's not going to be the exact same. So just roll with me here.
Cool. Always.
All right. So we're going to crank up the dials of the Wayback Machine a little bit further now, and we're going to go back to 1983.
Ooh.
So as history was written, John Elway was drafted number 1 overall by the Baltimore Colts. He was very adamant that he didn't want to play for the Colts. Even before they took him, he was saying if he was taken by the Colts, he wouldn't report, he wouldn't sign, he wouldn't play. And then we all know that's exactly what happened. He eventually got traded to the Denver Broncos, and the rest is history. But what if the Baltimore Colts had decided they did not want John Elway, and they didn't want to take that risk of him not showing up? So instead of John Elway, the Baltimore Colts select Eric Dickerson. And John Elway, this is where the scenario takes off. John Elway falls number 2. John Elway is a Stanford guy. I Bleav he was born and raised in California, West Coast guy. He was very vocal about wanting to play on the West Coast. So the Los Angeles Rams in 1983 take John Elway number 2 overall. So and John Elway is very happy with that. He wants to play for the Rams. He signs. He plays right away. No problems. So instead of Eric Dickerson, the Rams now have John Elway. And as you know, they went to a few Super Bowls in the 80s with at least one with Vince Ferragamo. Well, with John Elway, they probably go to a lot more. And then in 1984, here's where it gets interesting. So now that they don't have Eric Dickerson, they need a running back to pair with their now young stud of a quarterback, John Elway. So in 1984, the Rams take Greg Bell. Greg Bell was drafted in 1984 by the Buffalo Bills. He was Rookie of the Year that year. He had a great rookie season in 1984. In 1987, he joins the Los Angeles Rams. And has some more Pro Bowl years with the Rams after he leaves the Bills. So even though Greg Bell was not drafted by the Rams in this true to life scenario, instead of going to Buffalo, spending 3 years there, and then ending up with the Rams anyway, the Rams now have John Elway, and they have Greg Bell, who had a really underrated career, had multiple 1,000-yard rushing years. He rushed for like 15 touchdowns one year, 16 another, 11 another year. Had very successful years with the Rams down the line, but had the Baltimore Colts taken Eric Dickerson number 1 overall in 83. John Elway falls to the Rams in 84. John Elway falls to the Rams in 83. So now the Rams roll with Elway, and they take Greg Bell the next year, who they got 4 years later anyway. And now you have a John Elway, Greg Bell tandem in the backfield. And now that 1980s, 1990s Rams are even better. Maybe they don't leave LA. Maybe they stay put. They never go to St. Louis. We never have the St. Louis Rams. Things are completely different. Had the Baltimore Colts had the hindsight to know John Elway's not coming here. Let's take this all-pro caliber running back, Eric Dickerson. John Elway gets where he wants to go. He never ends up with the Broncos. They don't get their Super Bowls. The ripple effects from just this one pick being different changes the entire landscape of the NFL, changes locations, changes Super Bowl rings, changes legacies. Everything changes if the Baltimore Colts take Eric Dickerson rather than John Elway.
That may be one of the greatest what ifs we've done. Well done, sir. That was because
Thank you.
Because a lot of we do this, and my next one is the same way. It's all like, okay, a lot of little things have to happen, or it's probably unlikely, but that's like a super, like, absolutely could have happened, considering it's the first pick overall. And Baltimore knew the entire time Elway was not going to play for them. He had already started training with the Yankees because they were still saying they were going to take him. He's like, all right, I'll just play baseball. And yet they still took him. And, yeah, that would have just not only made the Rams, who were already, or later on in the 80s, a good team, it would have made them a great team, obviously having a quarterback of that caliber. The Broncos probably would have never been even a remotely relative franchise in the 80s. I mean, obviously, you don't know what could happen down the line, but that changes a ton. Our boy Dieter Brock wouldn't have played for the Rams in '85.
Nope.
Led them to Super Bowl. My Dieter Brock jersey would I don't know what I'd be wearing, a CFL jersey, I guess, or something. Like Dieter Brock wouldn't be a Ram most likely. The old rookie. So
The old rookie. That's right. Yeah, I didn't think about that either. That would have changed too. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
the old rookie wouldn't have been
The
around.
old rookie.
So that's crazy. And it's still shocking to me this day that Baltimore still went through with that pick. Like I understand that the Giants kind of did the same, the Chargers did the same thing when they took Eli, and obviously it worked out for both parties. But at least it was a strong quarterback class. Well, so was '83. What am I talking about? But it's weird to me that Baltimore took Elway and either didn't have a plan whatsoever or decided their plan was, yeah, we're cool with trading for a lineman and another draft pick, as opposed to trading another team for one of the other 5 first-round quarterbacks. Whereas at least the Chargers took Eli and like, okay, we'll trade and get the other quarterback, Phillip, plus we're going to get some draft stock out of it too. So I don't know. That whole Baltimore Colt, I mean, no wonder they moved. Obviously, it was a dysfunctional franchise, but it didn't crazy.
Yeah, and I just want to go back. I misspoke. Greg Bell did not win 1984 Rookie of the Year. He went to the Pro Bowl. He didn't win the Rookie of the Year, but he did have a great rookie season and went to the Pro Bowl.
There you go. Cool. Good. I like it. I can't top that. I don't know how that wasn't your number one. I'm excited to hear the rest of your list.
You'll see.
Wow.
Woo!
Okay. All right. Well, my next one's not nearly as exciting. So I'm going to go to the 2002 draft. Probably, arguably, one of the. So I already talked about David Carr, but this was this other draft I was thinking of is the bad QB draft. So this one's not as bad, but still, I'm going to talk about another quarterback. Joey Harrington was taken 3rd overall by the Detroit Lions. He was a tremendous quarterback at Oregon, had a great career in the Pac-10 at the time. Good kind of pocket passer, smart quarterback, good arm talent, and went to the Lions during their time. Let's just say, what was it? Almost 2 decades of just incompetence where they were just bad. Just awfully bad. No matter who they drafted wasn't good. No matter who they traded for wasn't good. No matter what free agent they signed wasn't good. Whatever coach was on the sidelines couldn't coach. The GM couldn't sign. They just couldn't do anything. And I say that, it's hard to say it respectfully, but I say it out of respect. Obviously, there's still NFL players and executives. They know what they're doing to an extent, but not really because they were just bad for so long. And so when you're a young quarterback and you get thrust into that situation, it's a lose-lose. I don't care. If Peyton Manning got drafted by the Detroit Lions in 2002, I don't think he would have been good. If John Elway, if Dan Marino, any of these guys, I don't think anyone, I'm not saying Joey Harrington's on that level, but it was just a bad situation. And so I'm looking at the same draft class, and if he would have gotten drafted by that New Orleans team, who at the time, Aaron Brooks and Jake Delhomme were on their roster, who Jake Delhomme was a backup who ended up actually going on to Carolina in later years and taking them to the Super Bowl. But at the time, he was just a backup. Aaron Brooks was kind of they didn't know if he was the franchise quarterback, but they were kind of pretending like he was going to be. And then if you remember, this is in 2002, so then 4 years later is when they trade for Drew Brees. So they were still in that kind of quarterback limbo. Had Joey Harrington gone there with a pretty good roster. I mean, they were picking that year 26th overall, I believe, 25th overall. So they had a pretty good roster. They had decent coaching, and I believe that was right before Sean Payton was there, but it was right around that time period. But just a better situation for Harrington where he could have gone. He wasn't surrounded in that losing culture, and maybe he would have had a little less pressure and been able to kind of make his career at least a more successful or at least tangible NFL career as opposed to the 4 years he played in Detroit and the 1 year he was on the practice squad in Miami before he was just out of the NFL. So we talked about it before when we talk about quarterbacks. It's such an integral part those first few years, and when you're just in that losing bad situation, it's hard to climb out of it. So yeah, Joey Harrington could have been a nice prospect had he gone elsewhere.
I like that one. I do because Joey Harrington. I mean, he kind of had a bounce back. Isn't he the one who kind of had success in with the Jets? Or am I thinking of someone else? I'm thinking of Chad Pennington. Never mind.
Yeah.
Forget what I said. But yeah, Joey Harrington definitely would have been in a much better situation in New Orleans. Um, and isn't it kind of funny that I don't think on this podcast ever neither one of us have brought up Aaron Brooks, but the fact that we brought him up twice in one segment now
Yeah.
is kind of eerie.
And I feel like we might be bringing him up a third time, maybe. Who knows?
Now I'm
Maybe.
excited to hear this because I'm not, but I feel like now you are. I'm excited now. Aaron Brooks.
Aaron Brooks. Aaron Brooks, though, like, there was a time when it was, like, in the New Orleans years, when it was, like, he may be the guy, but they, like, couldn't really commit because they didn't really know. He was kind of that like, poor man's Michael Vick.
Yeah.
Kind of
A little bit.
Michael Vick wannabe. He was, like, if Michael Vick was Nike, he was, like, FUBU or Reebok, like, just not quite there.
Hey, can we? I don't know why this just hit in my head, but can we coin a phrase on this podcast right here, right now?
Yeah, coin it.
Aaron Brooks is the microwave version of Michael Vick.
The microwave version?
Yeah, it's a quick and easy one. You're not taking your time. He's not as good as the fully cooked one, but you pop it in the microwave, it'll get the job done. It'll sit well for a little bit, but at some point you want a real home cooked meal, which is the real.
That is fantastic. I love that.
Oh boy.
Aaron Brooks, the microwave Michael Vick. You know what? while we're down this rabbit hole, that's our other coin phrase. We just love the word rabbit hole.
We do.
Isn't Aaron Brooks from the same town as Michael Vick? Am I off my rocker? Isn't he from like Newport News, New Jersey?
I have no idea. That is something we need to figure out though, because that would be unbelievable if he was.
Because I'm on it. Just stall for me. Do what you gotta do.
Yes, for sure. I don't know where he's from. Aaron Brooks. I remember that old NFL Street game. For some reason, Aaron Brooks was awesome to play with. So obviously, NFL Street. If that becomes a real thing, Aaron Brooks has a career in that. He just can't do it in the real NFL.
Yep. He is from Newport News, Virginia, just like Michael Vick. But Michael Vick went to Virginia Tech, whereas Aaron Brooks went to the University of Virginia.
That is.
So he is truly the microwave Michael Vick.
He truly is the microwave Michael Vick.
Look at that. Look at that.
Why do we have airtime?
Yeah. Only the coach and the Don. Only the coach and the Don.
Oh, I love it though. Okay, moving right along.
Right along. You have you have two left?
I do. My
cool.
Number 2 and number 1. So number 2, we're gonna go back a little bit again, not very far, 20 years. Wow, that's weird. We're just
not very far. Yeah.
1999, 20 years ago.
Yep.
So Tim Couch was taken number 1 overall by the Cleveland Browns. One of many quarterbacks taken. But let's say that instead of Tim Couch, they take Donovan McNabb, who went number 2 overall to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, granted, Philadelphia is a much better franchise than the Browns. Had Tim Couch gone to the Eagles and McNabb gone to the Browns, who's to say Tim Couch wouldn't have had a great career? But for this instance, let's say McNabb is just, in reality, is a better quarterback than Tim Couch ever was, and I think history shows you that that's just true. Mm-hmm. Right? It could have been that the Browns were just so bad, Tim Couch would have failed, or McNabb would have failed. Anybody would have failed. But let's say McNabb gets drafted by the Cleveland Browns, and they actually they find their franchise quarterback in 1999. Okay, in the year 2000, Cleveland had the number 1 overall pick again. Had they taken Donovan McNabb with their first overall pick in 99, let's say they get a couple more wins and they land, let's say, at the 4th or 5th overall pick. Mm-hmm. So in the year 2000, instead of taking Courtney Brown, the defensive end at Penn State, number 1 overall, they don't get that chance, and they're sitting, let's just say they're sitting at 4. They take a certain running back to pair with Donovan McNabb. They somewhat steal division rival running back Jamal Lewis. Mm-hmm. So now they have Donovan McNabb from the 99 draft. They get a couple more wins because of that, so they don't have the number 1 overall pick in 2000, and they land Jamal Lewis in 2000. So now, all of a sudden, Cleveland Browns, even though they've gone through decades and decades of just poor quarterback takes and poor draft selections and just poor football players, and just they're abysmal. Now actually you have something to build around. You have this solid foundation of an all-pro running back, Pro Bowl caliber quarterback, and Donovan McNabb and Jamal Lewis. And then so now you're looking at Cleveland Browns in the mid 2000s maybe not being as bad as they typically are. And now, and we mentioned earlier, maybe the Cleveland Browns are another AFC team you can throw in there to challenge the Patriots, to challenge the division rival Steelers. And maybe we don't see the dominance that the Patriots and the Steelers had. And maybe the Browns are not so laughable now. And maybe Baker Mayfield never ends up a Brown, and everything's different now. And maybe the Browns are actually one of the more respectable programs, one of the more respected franchises in the NFL had they taken Donovan McNabb, and then the year after taking Jamal Lewis. And then in 2007, they probably don't land Joe Thomas, but let's say they do. Now you have your franchise left tackle, your all-pro quarterback, and your all-pro running back. Boom, let's go win some Super Bowls, Cleveland.
Sounds like that's like Madden franchise mode right there. Just setting it up for success. So what's great and why I love when we do this, because we don't talk about these before, so I have basically the exact – this is what I was going to talk about was the whole Tim Couch McNabb thing, and I had it as my number 2 spot, which that's kind of funny. We had the exact same ranking of it. But I was actually going to take a little different approach to it.
Okay.
So I was going to take it as opposed to not – this is nothing against Donovan McNabb, but as opposed to saying Donovan McNabb was better than Tim Couch and he could have turned the Browns organization around. My approach was Tim Couch, kind of like what I've done with the other quarterbacks, was just thrust into a horrible situation, and had the roles been reversed, as you put, Tim Couch could have had a great career as a Philadelphia Eagles quarterback. And so when I look at let's just look at the coaching staffs here. Because remember, this is, I Bleav, if I'm not mistaken, the first year of the Browns as a franchise, correct? This was their expansion draft year.
I think you're right.
It was right. It was either their first one or their second one. It was definitely late 90s. So they were, putting together a brand new team, brand new roster, brand new coaching staff. So this is the Browns' basic coaching staff. So their head coach, Chris Palmer. Don't know who he is. I'm trying to think of, like, offensive coordinator. Didn't have one. I guess Chris Palmer was just the offensive coordinator. Their defensive coordinator, Bob Slowick. Don't really know who he is. Special teams coordinator, Ken Wisenhunt. So there's a name that's still around.
There's a name, yeah.
There's a name.
Yeah, we found one.
Found one. Yeah, that's about it. They had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a running back.
Hey,
I mean, not the
Kareem
Laker.
Abdul-Jabbar.
Yeah, not the Laker Hall of Famer,
Not the Laker.
but a different Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Although a Bruin.
Yeah, Irv Smith was a tight end, so that's probably was their best player. Was Irv Smith Sr. And that's about it. They had Phil Dawson as a kicker. He was a rookie, drafted that same year. And then Tim Couch. Now you look at the Eagles. We're drafting second overall. Head coach, Andy Reid. Probably going to be a Hall of Famer. Assistant to the head coach, Sean McDermott. Current head coach of the Buffalo Bills. Quarterbacks coach, Brad Childress. Had a very successful, or you could argue successful, but has been a coach in the league for a long time. Their tight ends offensive line coach, Pat Shurmur. Their offensive line coach, Juan Castillo. Their their defensive assistant, Steve Spagnuolo. Their special teams coach, John Harbaugh. Oh, and guess what? Their backup quarterback was Doug Peterson, who's their current head coach. So you just look at that coaching staff and just those few little names. That is setting someone up so much more for success. And I didn't mention running backs, Eric Bieniemy, running backs Deuce Staley. Just had a lot of more pieces in place to really give a young quarterback the chance to succeed. And again, not taking it away from Donovan McNabb, I think he was a great quarterback. But I think if Tim Couch was in this situation, he would not be arguably a top 5 greatest bust of all time, being the number 1 overall pick. The other ironic thing that I love about this is that on the 99 Eagles, their backup quarterback, besides Doug Peterson, was Coy Detmer. And on the 99 Browns, their backup quarterback was Ty Detmer. So there's a lot of comparisons and assimilation between these two teams, but I think it's safe to say the Eagles had a better organization, better roster, better situation moving forward, and would have definitely improved Tim Couch's trajectory future moving forward.
I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Yes. Yeah. I think my scenario is about 200 times more unlikely than your scenario. Could we go ahead and say that that's the greatest coaching staff that I've ever heard?
Right?
Just the names that have come out of there. I mean, I know Andy Reid has a great coaching tree, but just that one staff.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. I mean, how many head coaches came out of that one staff? At least 5.
Well, yeah, at some point or another, I mean, just currently, right now, Andy Reid's still head coach, Sean McDermott's a head coach, Pat Shurmur's a head coach, Steve Spagnuolo is a coordinator, John Harbaugh's a head coach. So that's 4 right there. Oh, and Doug Peterson was their backup quarterback. So there's 5 that were just in that room that are current head coaches. And then Spagnuolo.
And then
Oh, and I didn't even mention Leslie Frazier was a defensive back coach. Ron Rivera was the linebackers coach. Are you kidding me?
And you said, Brad Childress, right?
And Brad Childress was the quarterback's coach, yeah.
Wasn't he on? Unbelievable. And then Eric Bieniemy was on the team as a player. I mean, that's
disgusting.
I can't. That seems fake, but it's not. That seems like it's made up. That's unbelievable.
Like, how is this team picking second overall unless this was a fully constructed coaching staff for this draft after the season before? But yeah, it's crazy.
I don't know when Andy Reid showed up, but maybe that was his first staff with Philly. When did he? Was that his first year? Let's find out, because now we're gonna go down a rabbit hole again.
Yeah,
because so he took the Philadelphia Eagles job in 1999. That was his first staff.
That was the staff he put together. Wow, that's a hell of a staff.
Unbelievable
for a first staff.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Wow. Yeah, it's safe to say that Tim Couch would have had a much different career, as would have Donovan McNabb had those 2 picks been flipped.
I think so.
Easy.
I
Easy.
think so.
Okay.
All righty.
Wow.
Moving on. I'm kind of now thinking that should have just been number 1, for me at least.
With that staff, that's unbelievable. I won't stop thinking about that all night. Okay, so my number 1 scenario, probably a little bit personally biased here.
That's like real quick. I just got last thing about that for like huge football nerds like me and you. That's like football porn right there. There's like just looking at that staff. You can tell how excited we are. That's like football porn. So, all right, continue on.
Woo! I need a cold drink.
Cold shower?
Okay. Yeah. Oh, boy. Okay. So, number 1 overall, I'm going to go with my hometown team here, the Kansas City Chiefs.
Knew it was coming. Let's go.
We're going to go back to 1983 when
Come on, Todd.
They took Todd Blackledge. That happened, ladies and gentlemen. They took Todd Blackledge. It's not to say that Todd Blackledge was a terrible college quarterback, because he was good. I mean, at the time, it wasn't that terrible of a pick, or you couldn't really foresee what was about to happen, or whatever. But let's say that they don't take Todd Blackledge. They do take a quarterback, but not Blackledge. They take the gunslinger out of Pitt, who was just spiraling and crashing down draft boards, who lands with the Miami Dolphins at pick 27. Well, Kansas City, who picked 20 picks earlier at number 7, they take Dan Marino. Okay.
Yeah.
So Dan Marino gets drafted by the Dolphins in reality, and that year they went 12-4, I believe, and then the year after. So Dan's rookie year, he wins, I believe, rookie of the year. May have even won MVP that year. I'm probably mistaken, but he improves the.
I know the following year he won MVP in '84. I know that.
Okay, that's probably what I'm thinking of. Yeah. But so with Dan Marino, I think the Dolphins improved by like 2 games or something like that in Marino's rookie year. So let's say the Chiefs improved by 2 games as well. So in 1984, that draft was, I don't think, very star-studded. It was I don't think they had any Hall of Famers that year. So let's move on to 1985. So So the Kansas City Chiefs have Dan Marino. They have their quarterback. They still need to build around him. They weren't as playoff ready as the Dolphins were. So obviously the Dolphins were picking late at 27. So they had a great team in 82.
Mm-hmm.
So they take Dan Marino. He takes an already playoff team even further. So now the Chiefs take a little bit more time to build. So in 1985, the Chiefs were picking at pick 15. So let's say they're still around that same mid 15 range. Well, let's say they pick 16. Pick 16 of the 1985 draft was traded from the New England Patriots to the San Francisco 49ers, who traded up to draft none other than Pro Bowler Jerry Rice. So 1983, Chiefs take Dan Marino. 2 years later, 85, they're sitting at pick 16. They don't trade. They don't allow that trade, and they take Jerry Rice. So now you're looking at a Kansas City Chiefs offense who has Dan Marino and Jerry Rice. And then 4 years later, in 1989, they take Derek Thomas. Let's just be honest, that pick wouldn't happen had the Chiefs taken Marino and Rice. They wouldn't have been picking that high.
Mm-hmm.
But for this sake, why the hell not?
They traded up.
They had abysmal coaching staff in the 80s. After the 88 season, they fire whoever their coach was. I can't even tell you who he was. But they have Marino, they have Rice, so they have a great offense. They still take Derek Thomas in 89. Somehow, they trade up or something, or they're whatever. So now you're looking at a Kansas City Chiefs offense with Marty Schottenheimer, Dan Marino, Jerry Rice, a defense led by Derek Thomas. So that 90s Chiefs teams that were always really good that never got over that hump, now they can get over that hump because they have Dan Marino and Jerry Rice. And instead of Montana to Rice, you have Marino to Rice. Everything's different. Chiefs probably win at least 3 Super Bowls in the 90s. In my earlier scenario, Broncos never get Elway. So now the Chiefs dominate the AFC West. The Chiefs dominate the AFC in the 90s. Everything's different. I live a happy man, and I'm out.
It all comes full circle, huh? Instead of having Gerback to Dante Hall and Eddie Kennison, you'd have Marino to Jerry Rice and Tony Gonzalez. That'd be nice.
Little different.
Oh, man. Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing you left out of this scenario is there'd be no Dan Marino and Ace Ventura.
That's true. I didn't think about that. Well, maybe Todd Blackledge stars in not stars, but has a role in Ace Ventura. And since his quarterback career didn't work out, maybe he becomes an actor, and maybe that's his route.
Yeah. I mean, he is in the booth now, so I guess he knows.
He is a very good commentator.
Oh, he's tremendous in the booth. Tremendous. So Todd, if you're listening, we love you. Tremendous. You know, it didn't work out. We got it. That's what we do.
Yeah. No offense, Todd. Everything worked out.
Yeah.
I just wish we would have taken Marino.
Yeah. Crazy that they could have taken Jim Kelly also. Another guy they could have taken.
Yeah, Jim Kelly in that. And then there was who was that other? The Jets took him. He didn't have like a terrible career.
It was Easton.
Easley? Kenny Easley?
No,
or is that someone else?
Kenny Easley's the safety from Seattle.
Seahawks,
Hall of
that's
Famer.
right, yeah.
That's gonna bug me.
Yeah, no, I'll look it up while you're doing your number one.
Okay, cool. So my number one. This is one of my favorite receivers of all time, and his career could have definitely been very different had he not been drafted where he was drafted. So the 2001 draft, Reggie Wayne, taken 30th overall. So still a first-round pick, good value for the Colts. But here are the guys taken before him, and I just want to say who was taken before him and the quarterbacks on those teams. So if he would have been taken at that level, who he would have been getting the ball thrown to him had it not been Peyton Manning. So 8th overall, David Terrell was taken by Chicago. So this is all looking at Reggie Wayne's years in the league. So during his tenure, his quarterbacks were Jim Miller, Chris Chandler, Rex Grossman, and Kyle Orton. Probably a little different career. I mean, especially when you're a receiver, you're very dependent on how good your quarterback is. There's probably been a lot of receivers in the league that could have been Hall of Famers had they played with Hall of Fame quarterbacks. So this is an ode to all of them. I played receiver. I know how it goes. I get it. You gotta get the ball thrown to you, and you gotta get thrown to you well. Okay. So then, next next receiver taken off the board, Koren Robinson, taken by Seattle. His quarterbacks, Matt Hasselbeck, who had a nice career. Not bad. led them to a Super Bowl, but no
That's
Peyton
true.
Manning.
Yeah.
Also, Tavares Jackson, less than stellar.
Mm.
Next receiver on the board, Rod Gardner, taken by Washington. His quarterbacks, he had a bevy of quarterbacks. Washington did a very good job in the mid-2000 or early to mid-2000s of never having a true starting quarterback. They just like to have a new one every year. So we had Jeff George, had Mark Brunell, Jason Campbell, Danny Werfel, Patrick Ramsey, among others. There was a lot. Basically a new quarterback every year. Not Peyton Manning. Next quarterback, Santana Moss. Santana Moss had a good career. Drafted by the Jets. But he was thrown to, Chad Pennington, Mark Sanchez, went on and played for said Washington for a little bit, had some of those other quarterbacks. Still, had a good career, but not Peyton Manning. And the last receiver taken before Reggie Wayne. So 5 receivers taken before Reggie Wayne was Freddie Mitchell, taken by Philadelphia, who had Donovan McNabb and then Kevin Kolb after Donovan McNabb left. Again, good quarterbacks, but not Peyton Manning. So it's crazy to look at that Reggie Wayne and seeing how his career, especially being a receiver that is so contingent on your quarterback. Marvin Harrison, we could have had the same conversation. If you don't play with one of the greatest to ever lace them up, your career is probably going to look a lot different. So the 2001 draft, Reggie Wayne going 30th overall, pretty crazy that he was able to go there and have a great career.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, and you mentioned it too, having Marvin Harrison as your opposite receiver. So Reggie Wayne comes in 01. Marvin Harrison is drafted in 96. So not only are you getting Peyton Manning, but you also have a receiver to take a lot of the stress off of you, to take a lot of the attention. So Reggie Wayne not only gets Peyton Manning Hall of Fame quarterback, he's also playing with another Hall of Fame receiver in Marvin Harrison. So had Freddie Mitchell ended up where Reggie Wayne ended up, Freddie Mitchell probably ends up in the Hall of Fame because Freddie Mitchell had some talent. Santana Moss had some talent. So you get thrust into a situation with an established receiver and an already established quarterback. Yeah, that helps. That sets Reggie Wayne just completely up for success.
Yeah.
So that's it's pretty wild to think about.
Yeah.
The margin of talent between those receivers is probably pretty slim.
Yeah, I mean in general in the NFL, these are all guys that are some of the best athletes in the world. So I mean they're getting drafted for a reason. Obviously, among other reasons, we talk about guys like Jamarcus Russell that maybe just don't have the work ethic or the study habits, and that's why they flame out. But other ones are just situational. And a guy, and this is absolutely nothing against Reggie Wayne, who obviously is one of the greatest receivers to ever play. But
Sure.
A guy like Santana Moss, who actually did have a very good career. But imagine him paired with Marvin Harrison in Indy, and maybe his future would have been even crazier. So...
wild to think about what could have been in all these scenarios.
Yeah. So there you have it. The top 5 what-ifs in NFL draft history by the coach and the Don.
I like it. And we didn't have any – I mean, we both had the McNabb couch one, but
we had different takes.
Very different routes, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely different routes. So I love it. That's why I love doing these top 5 things. That's great.
A lot of fun, man. This was a good one.
Yeah, very good one. Always a good one. Always a good show. Anything to add?
No, just a great show. Had a great interview with Chris. Really appreciate him coming on. But this was great.
Yeah, love it. So, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks again to Chris for the interview, and we look forward to I'll just tease this now. We have a special live stream we're doing tomorrow. A live mock draft. We're going to be joined by 6 other podcasters, writers, contributors. We're going to do an AFC West and NFC West live mock draft. You can find that on Twitter or on YouTube. Going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be, we haven't done it before. I'm not saying it's never been done in the history of the world, but we like to say things like that, so it's probably never been done. We're going to be the first to do it. So it's going to be a good show, so make sure to tune in to that. You can catch it live on YouTube or Twitter, like I said, or we're going to have it recorded for the podcast, where you can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. But, Coach, pleasure as always. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yes, sir. You do the same.
Excellent. And we will talk to all of you tomorrow.
Bleav. an LA football podcast.
Touchdown Rams!
Touchdown, UCLA!
Recovered by the Chargers.
The Trojans back in front.
With your hosts, the Coach and the Don, part of the Bleav Podcast Network, LA's #1 sports podcast network.